All right. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is our last day at the CDOIQ Symposium, and we are starting with a very interesting session on data mesh. I'm very excited about this, and I'm very excited to have Omar Khawaja, who is Head of Business Intelligence and Analytics at Roche, to tell us about it. So Omar, over to you.
Thanks, JP. Big good morning and good afternoon and good evening from my side as well. I'm super thrilled to be here today to share with you all implementation experience that we had of data mesh and what we have learned from it in the past year and a half almost. I'm now approaching almost 2 years. I'm thrilled to be with you today. I am honored to be here presenting to you to such a vibrant audience and community of data professionals and leaders. Unfortunately, I could not join in person. The plan was colliding with my holidays, which I was taking back home in Pakistan, but back in Europe today since last night. So I'm joining from my home, away from home in Switzerland today. With this, please allow me to share my screen and start talking about it. I love this quote because this is a reflection of what our experience have been. You know, the more I learn, the more I come to know, I know very little. And this tells us the challenge and the opportunities we have in the world of data and AI across all the industries. And this is exactly what you will see and hear from a practitioner lens of what we have achieved and what we have tried and what we are learning in the past year and a half and two. I will structure the whole webinar into two sections. One is a quick recap of what we have done, where we started, why we started, so you know why we did it. And then we will double click on each of those principles, which I found to be most pragmatic way of sharing what we have learned and what we have implemented in each of those data mesh principles. So let's start. This simple statement, doing now what patients needs next, is our aspiration at the company at Roche. And this is what drives us, many of us, including me, when we come to office every day. And that's the only thing whether we are implementing some technology or a platform or initiative, that is on top center of our mind, because we have to deliver outcomes for our patients, with our customers, and we are thinking ahead what we need to do now. To give you a high-level summary of the company, we are a 125 years old company. We have number of medicines listed on the World Health Organization list of essential medicine. We invest a large amount of money in R&D across the board. You can see some of the numbers on the slide. Like many of us, like in the entire world, we were all facing pandemic. We were a reliable partner in the testing space, specifically when it comes to diagnostics. When it comes to COVID-19 pandemic. 14 plus million people are treated with our medicine every year. This is remarkable. We are the leader in diagnostics and pharma in the life sciences industry. And you can see some of the numbers on the tests, which are around 29 billion tests conducted globally across the board. One can imagine that to run such a large enterprise, what will be the needs of the data across the board, internally and externally, to solve this challenge, to realize this value, to deliver those outcomes. There have been traditional approaches for quite some time, and if you have been in the industry like me for 2 decades, I'm pretty sure that you must have implemented some kind of an IT system, some kind of a data mart, data warehouse, following some kind of philosophy around data warehousing. I'm pretty sure you must have spent months in designing those warehouses, those hierarchy needs that you need on simple things like what should be the time hierarchy, for example. Or in the past 5 years, I am pretty sure that if you are in this world, you must have implemented some shape and form, or have heard at least about the data lake, and must have put your data with the promise of putting something in data lake and magically getting value out of it. But unfortunately, like many of you out there, both of these approaches have been useful, but they had limitations. Limitation in terms of either time to value or time it takes to bring that whole model, whole organization, whole technology, as well as the promises that were made, which were not fulfilled. And as a result of this, we invested millions of dollars, hours and years of amount of data, amount of time in creating them. We dumped a lot of data on premise, on cloud, but it reaped limited amount of benefits. And this was exactly our challenge when I joined Roche 3.5 years ago as head of BI and analytics for diagnostics. And this is sort of a generic view of what we had in place at that time in one particular area, where our data was flowing into a very traditional ETL data warehouse and then moving into data marts and then moving into data marts. I joke sometimes around it that is there any server left in the company where our data is not moved, for example. But I guess the joke is on me when it comes to that. We did a quick dipstick survey around this to capture some of the sentiments and experience. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, the numbers are not promising. There are limitations, both in terms of how organization setup looks like, as well as how the technology on which this architecture was built was promising and unable to deliver things. So what could we do, right? If you have read following people like Adam Grant, for example, I love his books. I remember back in 2010, I was reading the book called Think Again. And it reminded me of this quote, which I absolutely share on almost everything I do, that it's insanity to doing the same thing and expecting different results. So let's translate this into the problem that I shared with you last slide. What will happen when I am doing another data warehouse? What will happen when I'm creating another data lake? Will it deliver magically some different outcome? I don't think so. And this quotes exactly remind me of that state that we are in, or we were in at that time. And if you read this comment from Malcolm Gladwell on the right-hand side, in order to bring these changes in the people belief, which is the very big topic when it comes to implementing data mesh, which is the social change, we need to create a community around them. And we need to make sure that those changes in the beliefs are practiced and expressed and allowed to be practiced. And this is what you will see in some of the things that I will mention and share with you all. I'll share a summary of our journey, and then I'll try to do a deep dive into each of those areas. And for us, it all started back in almost end of 2020 with the formation of our release of BI and analytics strategy. And one of the key pillars of that strategy was to refresh our technology and architecture. And this meant exactly the question that I showed you on the previous slide. And I strategically took a decision, knowing the culture of the company, knowing the state that we were in, that we need to take a call and start our journey towards first understanding what this promise of data mesh is, and what better thing to do than to collaborate with the creator, with the inventor, with the founder of data mesh. And thanks again, Jean-Marc, for all your collaboration over the years and for amount of hours that you spent in educating me personally, at least, on what you wrote in your first blog. And then, of course, later the whole book, which the world can read and which I highly recommend everybody to do as well. Our journey started with that understanding that whether data mesh is the right thing for us. And we make that conscious decision. And guess what? Our first learning was you can put a team together, but if you don't give them the right framework, right processes, right technology, you don't coach them, guide them, nothing will happen. And this was our struggle in the first 3 months till the time we reached in June 2021, where we started adopting this whole framework around data mesh, which we worked closely with our partners over here. We looked at how can we bring the domains on board, what should be the structure of that. We started learning the practices of product management and started applying on data, basically the product discovery practices, for example. And we found those partners who were crazy enough to adopt this model with us, who were willing to experiment, and they were not afraid of failing and learning from this. And luckily, fingers crossed, 2 years down the road, there has been exponential growth in number of different aspects with those people who started early and as others have now followed with us. We repeated this model iteratively with every other domain, as you will see in this practice in the next few slides. Similarly, our journey continued not just on expanding and onboarding and identifying those business outcomes first and then talk about technology. We were at the same time working very hard, learning what changes we have to do in terms of the organization setup of the platforms, organization setup of how we do platforms, how we define platforms, and where do we draw that line of what platforms needs to do and what the product teams will do in terms of building things on top of it. What changes we need to do in terms of governance processes. How can we change the whole outlook of governance being treated as those red-taped bodies out there and a forum of creation and innovation and sharing? And this has been a hard and a difficult journey, but extremely rewarding, especially to those who are close to the data, especially for those who are responsible for those outcomes. And while the humble beginnings were in the diagnostics division, I'm pleased to share that our journey has continued across Roche wide since last almost 9 months or so. In the same journey, I had the pleasure of taking the hat as a domain lead as well for our informatics and had tremendous amount of journey by putting myself not in just figuratively in our customer's shoes, but really wearing those shoes and using some of those artifacts and quickly adopting and learning some of the things that could be further improved. And that mindset of improving and changing and learning based on what we have done is one of the key aspects of such initiatives that we need to keep in mind. As you will see, there are also a number of things which are now running iteratively in different levels of maturities, depending on the domain and depending on when they have been onboarded across the organization. So with that note, let's have a quick recap of those 4 principles, because I think the best way to share what the learning journey is about deep diving and double clicking on each of those areas itself. And I will also share with you today why I call these things mind, body, heart, and soul, which happens to be the title of our today's talk as well. Starting with the decentralized domain ownership, this is the concept built upon software development. So people coming from that area may find this, yeah, we have been doing this. What's the big deal? Especially the people who are born in the microservices world. But the reality is that not everybody comes from there. Not everybody is from software development. So understanding domains, defining what that means, what it means within a company is an task, is an activity, it's a change management activity, it's a communication activity that needs to be undertaken. But the whole concept of data mesh is built around these domains concept. The ownership of those data products, that is the next principle, only happens within the domain. The collaboration that is needed to make sure data is reusable is happening within or built upon this concept, and hence I chose that no better way to describe it, that it is the soul of this whole initiative. If we don't understand the domain, if we don't have the right domain leaders, I believe we will have only limited success, if any, in this area. And I can blindly tell you that there are leaders, whether you find them in business or whether you find them in IT or you find them joined together as two peas in a pod, whichever approach you have in the company, you will find those people who believe that data can deliver value to the enterprise and to the business. And those are the leaders that are also required to lead that domain, to have those data product teams created. Moving on to the second principle, this is where the action is taking place in many different ways. Treating data as a product, essentially creating those data products, which, if you are like me and have been following some of the other webinars and the discussions on the social media and on the app, has also been a hot topic around even this conference. The definition of data product, when I remember when it came out long time ago, from anything that use data is a data product, versus where we are right now, where everything uses the data and you cannot make everything a data product. So defining those things, calling what apple and orange is very important, and hence the definition, which I'll talk about, is also very important. But this whole mindset shift of this product management of data is absolute necessary in making progress in general in data, and specifically on data mesh approach if you choose to be. If that mindset is missing, if that love in creating those curated data sets, those challenges from source systems, those codes that needs to be incorporated, those insights that needs to be shared, the idea of collaborating on building on success of each other, that can only happen with the right product mindset. That will not happen in waiting for requirement specifications, and that will not happen on waiting for an ideal data model. That can only happen with the iterative discovery and design and architecture approaches combined to treat data as a product. And there is no better way to describe that concept other than calling it the heart of the data mesh approach. Third principle, also very important, and unfortunately, the only thing that various data initiatives have been focusing all across the board is about technology, is about infrastructure. And here, in the last 6 months, I've been lucky to also drive a number of topics on platform strategy side. I cannot emphasize enough the importance and the role of a platform in enabling those domain teams to create those data products and to enable those computational governance in the data mesh approach across the board. This is not the traditional platform where everything is dumped on the platform team. The platform team is also treating the platform, the self-service infrastructure, as a product. It's not a data product, but it's a product nonetheless. And its customers are those data domain teams who are creating those data products. And that's a mindset shift on a very technical principle around data mesh, but the challenge of changing your mindset of treating it as a product, that should not be taken lightly. Since this is the skeleton, this is the body on which you are building those things, what better words or what better reference to call it than it is as a body around data mesh approach. Lastly, but not the least, the federated computational governance. I still remember from my first days with discussion with Jamak, I even asked her what on earth this means. And it took us some time to understand, because quite frankly speaking, understanding data governance on its own is a challenge. Its implementation is a challenge, and it has so many flavors and so many different ways and so many, unfortunately, negative things attached to it. And adding the whole federated computational part on top of it was not something which you can digest right away. So unlocking it, unfolding it was one of the first things we did. And maybe it comes naturally, being in one of the biggest and the most practiced democracies across the world, which works on the concept of confederation. You look at how you bring people together to make decisions rather than imposing decisions on them. Very, very difficult task. It's a full-time job. But how do you automate some of those things is just cherry on the top of that cake. And that's why this is where the mind comes in, where you are controlling, managing, governing your data by building those policies in a way which enable those data product teams rather than creating difficulties for them. So with that approach, I hope it sets some light why it is called mind, body, heart, and soul. And let's try to see what were each of those things that we have learned in these areas. In the area of data domains, it's important to define what that domain is. And we define it, as you can see on the quotes on the top of left-hand side of the slide over here. It's a combination of people, data, teams, products, which are responsible for the data which falls under that boundary. While the concept is driven from the data domain-driven design within software engineering, it's not 100% like-to-like because the nature of the data domain, and there is a lot of good content out there explaining those differences as well. We also learned it hard way, but what I would like to emphasize is that it's important to define it. It's important to define it in a way that this is what we have right now, and we will adopt, learn, and evolve this definition rather than spending years on defining a data domain definition and not doing anything with the data. Because at the end of the day, data is only going to deliver value once its insights are put into actions. And that may not happen just by sticking and spending all the time in defining a data domain out there. In the beginning, we had the data domains defined. In some cases, we had their data domain leaders identified. In some cases, we did not. So this is also not a must-have thing. This is not also, it's also not a chicken and egg situation that you cannot start without it. Some data people who are experts and who are eager to start may evolve and may mature to become the data domain leader as well. So give that opportunity to them. It's also important that data domains may not reflect your organization structure, and that's fine. But in many cases, depending on which industry and your organization design, it might be like to like. That's also good. This is not a good or bad, right or wrong discussion. It matters what applies to you over here. Another thing that we learned was that our information architecture teams who were working on this came up with a very nice maturity model. It gives a set of action items which takes you from wherever you are to a target state which reflects higher level of data management and governance maturity. And that could be also a good directional guidance on what needs to be done. And hence doing these annually or maybe semi-annually maturity assessments can be a good starting point and to have in the domain. Like I said, there is no need to wait for the perfect definition, but it's important to have one to start bringing those things together around a common concept. Once again, doing these things together with those early adopters is a key, no matter where they are in business or IT. Important thing is that to identify those leaders which are responsible for the outcomes. That's very key. They need to really practice as a catalyst to talk about this, to be visionary around these things and drive the change within that domain, within that organizational area. In order to identify what will happen within the domain, what are the prime business problem areas, we also came up with this approach of how to identify those areas through what we call Accelerate Workshop. And then later on, a deep dive discovery period of somewhere between 2 to 6 weeks to identify using product management practices of product discovery, things like opportunity trees, or what you see on the slide like lean value trees, for example, which talks about what outcomes we need and what possible solutions, those hypotheses that could help us achieve those outcomes, and then talk about what data we need for the people who can deliver those outcomes. So it starts with the human-centered design. It doesn't end with them, but it starts with that. It doesn't start with the data. And that's very important, because once you have aligned the people who needs to deliver those products, they know who's going to consume them, and they know if those outcomes are being delivered, and they can measure whether those outcomes delivers or not, and hence deliver and measure the value of those data products. A very, very big change in how you make data products, how you discover data products, as compared to the traditional practice of let me create a data lake and let me create a dashboard for you, for example. So this is a little bit around what data domains first principle look like. If you think about the balance between social and technical aspect, I would rate this is 70% social change, this is 70% change management, communication, and 30% technical, because in order to bring those things to life, you can, with the maturity of the organization, start using certain technologies around it. And I see a great open opportunity which has not been tapped so far in terms of making this a more structured process and yet providing full flexibility to the data domains out there. After all, we are a young industry in the data as compared to others, but there is a lot of room to grow. Let's look into the second principle. Over here, once again, definition of the data product. And I know some people were talking about data as a product, data product definitions, and collecting these. So for all of you who are doing that, here is one more. So we define it like data products are a life cycle managed combination of technology, meaning code, meaning all those pipelines, those visualization insights, depending on the scope of the data product, and of course, data, which is all combined together that delivers value in that specific business context. I know it's a mouthful, but once you have repeated this hundreds of times, you know it's you can understand it, covering the important aspects of life cycle management around product management and whatnot. Very important is to have this mindset shift from project management to product management. Those days of just creating something, throwing it across the boundary lines, if that is the approach, that is the biggest change that you need to take, which essentially means taking the ownership of those codes, those life cycle of the codes, those data, And I want to explicitly mention, I personally can only recommend staying away from the word data ownership, but stick to data product ownership is very important, and it will drive much more positive behaviors than anything else. Having those people who can apply that product mindset, who think about customers, who think about their outcomes, who thinks about the change needed, who talk about features, who talk about continuous discovery is very important. Then having those fixed approach and 7 months project, which only delivers maybe a couple of nice charts and graphs at the end of the day. And please don't take me wrong, I love to visualize data. I think it's absolutely important to do that, but that's not the end. That's only a means to different things. Similarly, when it comes to defining those things over here, it's some of the things that we learned from the book, which I mentioned earlier, Shamak's book around data mesh. I highly recommend everybody who wants to do anything with data mesh to read that book, is to look at from the end user personas. Is your end user going to be those set of data analysts or data scientists? Or is it going to be the ultimate end user who will use the insights to make that decision? Depending on your organization, your domain, you may have both or multiple such varieties are out there. In the world of life sciences, we are quite familiar or aware of the fairification of the data, which is making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And trust me, there are different interpretations of and implementations of this. But one of the key aspects from other approaches versus data product approaches is to explicitly talk about and make it a point to make the larger data domain and the organization aware of those characteristics of the data product in terms of its security, its discoverability, its addressability, etc., etc. These characteristics are also very important in bringing that computational governance part, because there are a lot of things, if you do the platforms right, if you identify these definitions correctly, you can automate the service level indicators on those service level objectives that you have set for these service level agreements that these data product offers. And it's a great opportunity to bring those SLA, SLO, SLI concepts to life when it comes to implementing them through fitness functions, etc., and making them visible to all the people in the company around what those fitness functions are. It's like marketing your product. It's like giving that love and curation that it deserves to make it more trustable and reusable across the board. Some of these aspects are only possible when you make the right technology choices. Otherwise, like us, you will also learn that there is a long journey of creating or inventing the wheel rather than simply start using them. At the same time, something which was, I believe, a little bit controversial a few years ago, especially when I was discussing it with my team and I said, no, we have to follow it. To me, it was a given that what kind of data architecture are we going to implement? And based on our learnings, based on the success of the Inman's model, for example, on how things got evolved into things like Data Vault 2.0, for instance, and in order to also follow those agile practices, he decided also to incorporate Data Vault practices, which in itself bring in the world of best practices and covers various complexities around having raw data, how do you create the business vaults and information marts, and how do you can use that construct, combining it with the data mesh and data product approaches to bring it to life for the company. It's not easy. It's an understatement. To date, it's a learning journey for us. We have also made significant amount of progress. My colleague have also talked about this a lot also in the Data Vault conference. I highly encourage you to look for that webinar, and maybe I can share it in the app as well. Having said that, the bottom line is that while you have those social changes around product thinking, how you structure the team, what kind of different roles you have, what kind of personas your product will transfer, what kind of things that you need to include, how do you implement those SLA, SLO, SLIs, what data architecture practices you need to incorporate. This is all part of that treating data as a product approach. And that's why I was saying this is the heart of data mesh implementation. This is where the action is taking place. It is happening where the people are closest to the data. This is not happening outside in an ivory tower, although I will talk about how you can structure a possible structure of the teams around it to make it happen. The third principle around self-service infrastructure. And I'll try to unwind this complex topic based on the data mesh approach around data platforms, for example. I've been doing these data platforms since 2018, 5 years now. Learned a lot from extremely talented colleagues in my current and previous companies. Thank you for all your guidance, knowledge, and still listening to me and bearing with me. And the way the platform needs to take place, needs to build, is very different as compared to what we have been doing in past. It is all about lowering the cognitive load, making life simple for the data product teams. Thinking about what services those personas would need that would be fulfilled by the capabilities of the platform, delivered through number of technologies from multiple cloud providers in all SaaS, PaaS, and infrastructure as a service model. If you are like one tool will solve your problem, sorry to share the news, those days are gone. You will need to use the best tool, which works with the other technology choices in the company, comprising of both cost and security and time aspects. That will make it work for you. For us, it was a combination of technologies that you can see on the slide over here. An important thing is that you don't have to spend 2.5 years to prepare the platform before you start your journey. You might have just 3 services ready, and you can still start your journey with a very humble beginning of crawling first, then walking, then running, rather than waiting for the perfect platform while people are waiting and to deliver value. Because remember, just delivering platform is not going to deliver value. It's about building those data products and putting them in the hands of those end users who will use those insights that will deliver the value. The sooner, the faster, the shortest that journey is, that will drive the value. The easier that process is to build that data product, that drives that value. And that's the mindset shift that we need to have. This means that the traditional platform teams might need to let go of certain things. It's no longer, for example, their job to manage the data pipeline centrally. It's with the domains, it's with the product teams. However, having those pipelines, those tools, those integration of the technologies, making it seamless developer experience for the data product teams, that's one of the many jobs of the platform teams that needs to take place. They have to play this educating role. They might have a smaller enabling team going domain by domain, product by product, kind of an internal university setup that educate people around across the company. So to double click on this example, right? If you have read the book, you might have seen that Jean-Marc talks about these 3 data mesh planes: infrastructure, product experience, and mesh. And there are different personas that might be the target audience of these components of your platforms if you cut that big platform box into 3 different areas. And each of those areas, those planes will have those services enabled for those personas. And those services are in delivering those capabilities enabled by a number of technologies for those personas eventually. And that approach, in our experience, have been, let's say, good success story around it. And I think we will continue to make this progress towards it. And it employs number of best practices that you can see across the board in the industry in terms of developing the scalable platform with as much ease of use as possible. Moving on to the fourth principle, federated computational governance. Like I said, it's not about a disconnected governance body. It's about bringing those leaders together with even a platform representation on that federated governance forum and changing and translating that forum into a sharing forum, into a forum which creates value rather than create hurdles for people. It talks about eliminating those roadblocks. The conversation shifts from I need a platform, I need a technology, to my next quarter goal is to deliver X, Y, and Z outcome. And in order to do that, I would love that if I can have that data from that domain and looking into other domains, product backlog to align on when I can have that offering from the other domains to deliver my data product, for example, if you are dependent. Making the work visible is one of the key areas, allowing people which are close to the data to show how they are using it, making sure those SLIs that I talked about are visible so that you know who can access it, what are the different needs that are evolving across the board. He might see that there are many common needs across the domains. And how about automating them where possible, for example? How about learning from each other? How about finding the most optimized way of doing things, which is also cost effective and reduce time to value, for example? Some people have also asked us, or I've been in discussion that, does the domain thinking means that every domain will have a platform? Yes, you can have that if you have too much money to waste and you are in the business of creating platforms rather than generating value of your customers. You can do platforms after platforms. It's like, no, I will invest all my time in creating and inventing a wheel rather than making a journey with the wheel. And the beauty and the value is making that journey and not keep on repeating that process of reinventing the wheel. And I think that's a big mindset shift that we have and we need in order to make this possible. This is also to show you an example. I hope I'm not butchered on this, but we have like 20 plus domains already identified which have delivered this X number of products. And you can see some of the fitness functions around those products over here. You can also see how many products are fulfilling those SLOs that they have. These are all automated numbers that you see on the slide. You can also see that what is the dependency on each other data products. You can also see the shopping experience through marketplaces that we have. And this was not there when we started this journey. Thanks to amazing people that we have in our teams, we were able to make this possible. And as you might have heard many times, we may not have all the right tooling sorted out, but we have a lot of amazing tooling available around that to make those things alive and come to life right now. And rest assured that each of these product teams are not inventing the wheel of, this is how I will implement it. This is how I will implement it. No. We have agreed on certain definitions, and through simple configuration, each product team can plug and play their SLOs and their SLIs are available, they are live, they are visible. They don't have to worry about my shopping experience or my data product shopping experience, for example. And that makes life a lot easier rather than everybody only talking about the mechanics of technology rather than focusing on the outcomes. So how you can make those changes happen is if you have read this book, Team Topologies from Matthew Skelton and Manuel Paish, it's a great book out there. And it's a very good companion of bringing the concept, especially on the social side, life to data mesh, for example. So for example, having those data, the third principles of self-service infrastructure, that is brought to life by your platform team that enables those services that are then used by your data product teams, which in the team topologies concept are the stream aligned teams that are responsible for their data product, and they use the services of the platform. Number of teams can be classified as enabling teams. So for example, enabling teams can help domain on board through their accelerate journey, through their discovery journey, and then step back in 4 weeks, in 6 weeks to let the stream aligned team take full ownership of the whole concept. There could be an enabling team which facilitates the education and the capability building part, for example. There could be a mechanism where we have a specific example in a particular domain, which is very, let's give an example, maybe you find a extreme scientific and research data which requires a specific data ingestion and handling mechanism which is not on the platform, then that stream-aligned team can work with your platform team in a 6-week co-creation process to create that service and capability on the platform, rather than that domain team going on a complete different tangent and creating their own platform once again. This is a mindset shift, but the topics and frameworks like team topologies can really help you bring that concept to life. One thing that we have started to experiment, if I may be bold enough to say that, is the idea of this complicated subsystem teams around bringing the concept of master data life through this type of team structure. Since we have not implemented it, I can only share that maybe in 6 months, 1 year time, something is ready to be shared. And if you are exploring such things, please, by all means, I'd love to hear from you if you have explored this concept of complicated subsystem reflecting the master data implementation in your company. Just to share a few numbers, we have 50 plus operational data products. I think even some number is missing. If there are more than 400 now, I may have skipped typo on my part. The number of features that a product team can independently create and release are no longer dependent and bottlenecked by the platform team. As you can see on the left-hand side, there are hundreds of releases every week rather than having one release every 3 months. This is a huge game changer when you are decentralizing and empowering the data product teams. Your data ops pipelines and the automation and the controls that you can build in, which also helps you bring that computational governance to life, is a key enabler to make it possible. And yes, it is possible to do that. And you can still have a lot of control and governance in place rather than not having anything done for 3 months. The time to value have increased, whether you are doing an MVP from nowhere to something in the hands of the end user in 6 weeks is amazing. As I was sharing with you, my own experience as the head of the data domain lead for our internal IT data products was 4 weeks for our first release. That was amazing to see that. Yes, we did not create our platform, our only focus on what we would like to do. from data ingestion all the way to the insights being generated. And that's love to see that across the board, right? I'm sure you would like that too. We have number of data product teams working all across the board, a lot of collaboration happening on our wikis and our Stack Overflows, which reflects the liveliness and the importance of those enabling teams, which are trying to educate and facilitate and create that community, which brings that concept, that change to life, for example. From our humble beginning of one domain in June 2021 to 20 plus domains, having those hundreds of data products created, those 30 plus product teams across the board, is just heartwarming. It's amazing to see such amount of value being created and such opportunity created all across the company. So thanks for listening to me. I'm here to answer your questions in the next 9 minutes. So I believe, JP, you can also help me with some of the QAs that might have pop up. And those of you out there who wants to connect offline, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and you can also connect me on the app during the symposium. So JP, do we have anything?
Thank you, Omar. This is very, very interesting, and I know data mesh is on a lot of people's mind. Certainly, it's on my mind. Before we get into the question, there was a poll that was sent out. Is your organization implementing data mesh? And what we can see in the results is that slightly below 20% have already started implementing. 50% are exploring, that have not started implementing, and then 35% no, are just not looking at it, not exploring. So that's quite interesting. What I'm taking from these poll results is that there isn't a lot of track record quite yet, but you do at Roche. And so my first question to you, and then we'll go to the audience questions, but is when you look at this poll, like, do you like what is your reaction to it?
I think these are very real numbers out there. If I would have seen anything else like a complete shift, yes, we are implementing data mesh, I think we would be locked in that hype cycle. So this really is a good reflection of the reality out there. And if I may have mentioned or not mentioned before, data mesh may not be the right solution for your data problems as well. Hence, checking whether data mesh is the solution or not is the step 0 of starting of your journey. Yeah. So it's good reflection. I see a number of other topics as well on even in the symposium and in other conferences. So it's a good reflection of what's happening in the industry. Not surprising.
Okay. All right, great. So we have a question from Ravindra, which I find very very relevant. Did you have to make any organizational or cultural, but I would put the emphasis on organizational, in your organization to implement this architecture?
Organizational in terms of reporting line and creating new departments.
And shifting, you know, if it's a matrix
Exactly.
Organization, changing the matrix. If it's not matrix, like reporting lines, and yeah.
So it's the answer on the organization part is the changes were not because of the data mesh at all. The changes were because of the larger organizational transformation journey that is already taking place. Because of those changes, they nicely aligned with what the data mesh was also approaching, and hence the reason of choosing it, right? So not because of the data mesh. On the second part was culture. Heck yeah.
Yes, of course.
That's a given. Life will be spent in any data initiative, especially like data mesh, on the cultural aspect of it, because you are doing decentralized. It's no longer a job of a 30% COE team. It's a job of everyone who is responsible within the domains. That definitely requires a cultural mindset shift. And the concept of having an enabling team doing that, which is sort of one of the implementation tools that you can use, is a good application of that concept and use of enabling team to drive that cultural shift.
Excellent. Okay. So another question from Renee. How do you get the data producers to work with you if they perceive that the value to be for other groups downstream and not for themselves?
This is absolute real and a very good question. We have faced such things, and there are a number of reasons why it happens. And then I can maybe shed a minute or two to talk about what we have tried so far.
Please.
And I don't also want to sound like everything is rosy. No, there are challenges in both technical and social side every day. I was
Right.
just talking to somebody today who was showing me that one of their data assets is consumed by 70 different data products with the technical link. And if something happens on that, imagine the chaos downstreams. But that business person having the visibility to
Of
know
course.
the responsibility on them, to me, that was the loveliest call
Right.
of the day, by the way, right? Just to give you an example. But to answer your question, thanks for asking this. And the reason that this happens is that different teams and different domains are in different journey of data mesh adoption, because not everybody's on board from day one. So for example, people in X domain, like your HR, your type of organization, might want to join a little bit later in the journey. But as you can imagine, some of the HR data, which is not sensitive, is used by so many different functions. And to show them the value based on the success of others can help them structure the team. In many cases, what we have done is also to sit with them, co-create the first MVP with that enabling team, which may violate the construct of enabling team, to be very honest with you, but it helped them get up and running. And then it was like you put your child on a bike, you remove the safety wheels and let them ride the bike afterwards. Similar examples could be in your highly shared data domains like finance, for example. Everybody would like to do their expense reporting. You can structure this construct in so many different ways. For example, you can make an expense data product team responsible to serve everyone, or you can have a very smaller construct that, okay, fine, I'm just giving you line level reporting, do whatever else you want. You have so many different options depending on your organization maturity and depending on your level of domains that you have onboarded. A path could be very different. This, by the way, is one of the key jobs and activities of that federated computational governance forums now, because you are all together in this. You are sharing the dependency on each other. You are winning on the success of each other. And that will drive that discussion forward, that how my value creation is also your value creation, for example, rather than this is my data and I will not share it with you.
Yeah, and we have 2 minutes left, but I maybe we just stay on that topic.
Yeah.
So this is the part that I have not seen a clear answer on. If I am the owner of a domain and therefore owners of the data product within that domain, what are the incentives? And you are, the overall sort of architect of this whole data mesh thing.
Yeah.
What are the incentives, including the reward system and things like that, in my organization to drive me to do a good job in this stuff?
Yeah. So it's we have adopted 3-4 things which I can share, and this is a question that every domain lead, in fact,
Of
asks.
course,
And
that's right.
in our list, we have actually listed these things. You might have a internal social media platform where you can use and recognize, and recognition and motivation is a big incentive for many people, and it's a social topic, not a technical topic. Second thing is that people are reluctant to share data because they don't feel comfortable that the certain security compliance will be followed. Here, a proper platform and services and visibility and traceability and lineage that are enabled by the platform could be a very good winner for such challenges if you have such. The forum where you have this remember the slide that I was showing you, you have all the domains listed and you have all the products there, and you can show that mesh and connectivity around it.
Right.
That feeling of belongingness in that community, which is sharing the data, is a very big driver, and it's a human nature to be joining that.
Yeah.
Apart from that, it might be that the data product leaders, because it's a strategy of your company, are encouraging as part of the organizational leadership that this is the practice that needs to be followed. And you might have some internal reward points, some forums where you are rewarding them, recognizing them. Perhaps those could also support in driving this big cultural shift towards this.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, that makes total sense. So we have come to the end of this session. So Omar, thank you very much. I think this was these insights, and especially since they are grounded in the practical experience, I always find really, really valuable. And I'm hoping that the audience have felt this as well. So thank you very much for spending time with us at the CDOIQ Symposium.
It was my pleasure, JP, and I look forward to stay connected. And like I said, feel free to reach out if you on LinkedIn or via app. Thank you so much once again for the opportunity.